yesterday over at the ICR in Dallas speak on the topic of being pro-life and why that is the God position, and it was just wonderful. So I know that the Lord is going to bless us today. The different topics that we'll cover: first of all, this morning service we'll be hearing a message on scientific evidence for the inspiration of the Bible. At 12 o'clock, we have a free lunch that we'll hope you'll stay and eat with us next door. We'll give instructions on that at the end of the service. And then at 1 o'clock p.m., we'll gather back in the auditorium and hear another presentation along the lines of evolution versus creation and the problems with the so-called scientific narrative that pushes the worldview that says we all evolved apart from God. So my prayer for you today is that your faith will be strengthened and that you will be blessed.
As I haven't heard for a while, and it was a surprise that it was being performed, so we hadn't arranged that. So I know we've been trying to arrange me speaking here for a little while and trying to work out this weekend being at ICR yesterday, so it's an honor to be here. A very exciting message for you, and I promise the next 4 hours are going to fly right by. We're going to go really slow. It's not going to be 4 hours, but I have about 4 hours of material that I'll pack in with just this morning's service, a lot to cover. And it's obviously going to be focused on how do we know the Bible is inspired. I do what I do today is because my parents, the strong background that they gave us, not only teaching us things that were true, but living it out themselves. It made all the difference in the world. So my mom led me to Christ when I was 5. I think I went bowling after that, and now I'm here today. So that brings you up to speed. But a little bit more background. After graduating from high school in Wisconsin, went to John Brown University in Arkansas Christian University to study engineering, got a degree. Then I became more interested in physics, but they didn't have a physics major. So I left there, went back to Wisconsin, went to the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater to get a degree in physics, applied to any writing. First, we have internal consistency. Does the book you're looking at, whatever it is, does it contradict itself? If it does, that's pretty good evidence God didn't write that because it would contradict itself. Then we have historical accuracy. If the book you're looking at gets history wrong, good evidence God didn't write that, he would know history. Then we have prophetic accuracy. If the book you're looking at makes predictions about the future that have been proven false, good evidence God didn't write that because he would know the future. And finally, scientific accuracy. If the book you're looking at makes statements that can actually be tested directly by science and have been proven false, and we can see that, I'd say that's pretty good evidence too. God didn't write that because God would know science. 4 tests. With the time we have, we're going to focus just on this last one, which we also call scientific foreknowledge. Here's the point with this. The Bible was written a long time ago. Old Testament roughly 1500 BC to about 400 BC. New Testament roughly about 40 to 100 AD. Long before we had microscopes and telescopes. Yet there are things in the Bible that scientists have discovered and they're thinking, whoa, those guys got that right. But they couldn't have known that back then. And that's true. There's no way they could have known those things back then. Which is the whole point. They didn't know God inspired them in what they wrote. So that's the backdrop for the rest of this presentation here. But then you have the skeptics that, oh, no real scientist believes the Bible. Truth is, most major areas of science we have today were founded by Bible-believing Christians. If you'd like some examples, I brought some along. Antiseptic surgery, bacteriology, calculus, chemistry, computer science, electronics, electrodynamics, electromagnetics, fluid mechanics, galactic astronomy, gas dynamics, genetics, hydraulics, hydrostatics, oceanography, optical mineralogy, paleontology, pathology, physical astronomy, stratigraphy, thermodynamics, thermokinetic, vertebrate paleontology, and the scientific method, all founded by Bible-believing Christians. Anyone who says that no real scientist believes the Bible, they don't only not understand science, they don't even know history. This is where science came from. It was birthed out of the Christian community. Science owes its origins to Christianity. Shall be unclean for 7 days. He must purify themselves in the water of purification on the 3rd day and the 7th day of the month. Okay, what's this water of purification? A few verses earlier, he tells us. He says the priest is to take some cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet wool, and throw them on in the midst of the burning the heifer. That sounds bizarre. Some of you are old enough to remember the Beverly Hillbillies. It sounds like something Granny would come up with in the kitchen. He was always doing weird things, put possum in a pot and stirring it around. That's what this sounds like, some weird concoction. But modern scientists have looked at it, they say, well, that's not weird at all, it's fascinating. And here's why. The cedar wood, those ashes and the heifer burning, combine to make lye, which is a caustic soda that we call soap. You touch a dead animal, washing with soap would be a good thing. Then the hyssop plant converts into thiamol, which is isopropyl alcohol, kills bacteria. You touch a dead body, killing bacteria would come in handy. And then the scarlet wool forms a gritty substance like an SOS pad in your kitchen, or if you use orange goop to get grease out of your fingers or whatever, that has pumice in it. So it's very abrasive. That's what the scarlet wool does. And applying it on the 3rd and the 7th day, bacteria grow very well in a damp environment. So you want to wait a few days for it to dry out, then you apply this. And you wait a few more days, you apply the second time, and you're considered clean. Modern scientists say this is a great natural remedy if you don't have antibiotics to recreate today. Did Moses know anything about bacteria, germ theory, and isopropyl alcohol? Obviously not. This is God saying, I want you to write some things down. He writes it down. Moses is probably like, that's so cool. You got anything else? God says, let me think. He said, yeah, I got another one. So as I close, let me share one more example. And this is also super cool. Another one, if you haven't heard this one, it'll blow you away. Moses talked about a certain Jewish tradition in Genesis chapter 17, verse 12. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generation. Why did Moses say the 8th day? He could have said anything. He could have said the 3rd week, the 5th year, anything. He said the 8th day. Well, modern scientists have discovered some fascinating things about blood clotting. There are 2 major things in your bloodstream that are necessary to clot your blood. You got vitamin K and something called prothrombin. Actually, on a molecular level, there are about 24 events that have to occur in proper sequence to clot your blood. Event A has to occur first, which then triggers event B. Event B happens, which triggers C, and C triggers D on down the line. If you miss one of those, you're dead. How did that evolve over millions of years when some creature had none of that and had to evolve 24? Can't survive without it, but let's say it reproduces somehow and it makes mistakes in its DNA mutations, and now its offspring has event A and B. Great. Doesn't do it. What if it had A, B, C, D? Doesn't do it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G doesn't do anything. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, R, R, A, B, W, no. 2 doesn't in a row. You can't evolve that by accident over millions of years. It's a design feature. Yes. That's on a molecular level. On a little bit higher level, that's vitamin K and prothrombin. Scientists discovered vitamin K develops in a newborn somewhere between days 5 and 7. That's when it kicks in. Prothrombin looks like this. I'll graph it and explain the graph. The dotted line across the top is the normal level of prothrombin in your body. The numbers across the bottom are days after birth. Scientists have determined that on day 1, a baby has about 90% of its prothrombin. Pretty high, not bad. Then it drops dangerously low between days 2 and 5, only 30%. Then on day 8, it spikes to 110% of its normal level, and it will never be that high again for the rest of your entire life, only on day 8. So if you are a baby and you need a surgical procedure, day 8's the perfect day, because for sure by then you got vitamin K, and you have more prothrombin than you'll ever have the rest of your life. Did Moses. Don't know anything about vitamin K and prothrombin, obviously not. This is God saying, write it down. And we're just scratching the surface. So the Bible passes this test of scientific foreknowledge. In fact, it passes all 4 tests: internal consistency, historical accuracy, prophetic accuracy, and scientific accuracy. 27% of our Bible is prophetic in nature. It's over 8,000 passages making over 1,700 predictions. And it's 100% accurate. Some of the prophecies are for our future. The rest have come true in every single minute detail. How's that possible unless God's inspiring these writings? And in each of those other categories, and it talks about in more details. So I ask, do Christians have faith that the Bible is the inspired word of God? Yes, we do.
Bukas yan.
I was at a talk at the Ministry and he lives in San Diego, California. He's going to give a talk and
Dami yung ulala mo. Kasi basa mo.
Really? I thought it was gone. Yeah.
Gang signed it?
Don't make me throw those up.
Yeah, I know.
I got mine already. Try it again.
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks, Ronnie.
Ah, I'm recording too. It's okay. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's right. He lived in Gurnee. Are you familiar with Gurnee? They lived in Gurnee at Lindsayville area. We lived every opportunity we had. So that's how we did it.
Well, mag-sign up ka na sa yung Bible study. So?
Now hear me while I pray. Take all my guilt away. Oh, let me from this day be wholly thine. As thou hast died for me, oh, may my love to thee, your warm and changeless be a living fire. While life's dark maze I tread, and griefs around me spread, leave thou mine heart with darkness.
I have a sugar crash in a little bit. I try to only have dessert when I'm awake, so I'll cut back a little bit. But no, I appreciate that. This talk should be interesting, and it's going to cover a lot of information in a short period of time. I don't need to repeat my background for this one, since you're probably all just here earlier, so I will fly through the background slides real quick and get to this again. Okay, well, okay, this is going to be you. You're going to be drinking from a fire hose. Partially because I go a little fast, but partially because we're going to cover a lot of topics. So instead of focusing on one, which yesterday, for those of you who were at ICR, I gave a talk that gave a little bit of a background with creation evolution, then we really got into some DNA stuff and kind of stuck with that. This one's going to be kind of all over the board, but it's going to be very helpful because it's going to cover so many things that you're like, oh yeah, what about that? And what about that? And what about that? And ultimately, this is not really about evolution. That's not what really matters. It's not like you're going to die and stand before God and He's going to say, did you believe in evolution? No. Okay, come on in. That's not the requirement for getting to heaven. So it's not really about whether evolution is true or not. It's about the authority of Scripture. Do we really believe it? Or do we go somewhere else for truth and then take that and then use that to figure out what we're going to buy into in here, what we're going to believe and what we're not going to believe, or how we're going to reinterpret it to tell God what He actually meant? And many skeptics obviously do that, but many Christians do that. They'll learn something like, well, I watched this YouTube video, I read this article about the Big Bang, about evolution, or 8 men or whatever, and it's like, this is science, these guys are smart, and they've proven it, so when you read the creation account, you can't really mean that literally, because we know better now. Because we're really smart with all these modern scientists, and so then we tell God what He actually meant. Many Christians do that, even subconsciously. We think we know something from some other source, and well, that's got to be true because these guys are so smart, they can't be wrong, it's science. And then we reinterpret the Bible. I have many other talks that go into more details on that, but what we're going to do is we're going to go through one of these things at a time and just show, no, it's not support for evolution at all. It actually matches up with what Scripture has been saying all along. So we're going to go through a number of these things that are associated with evolution. When people think of the Big Bang, they do tie it into evolution, because like the Big Bang that's how it all started, right? And then eventually you had evolution kick in on our planet after that. So the two seem to be tied together. Certainly 8 men, when you hear about 8 men, you think, well, yeah, that's definitely an evolution thing. When you think about the fossil record, well, the fossils show evolution over millions of years, so you tie that together. carbon-14 dating, I mean, that's one of those things where, yeah, it pretty much is evidence for evolution. I don't know what to do with it because, you know, I want to believe the Bible, but I think carbon-14 dating has disproved it. So what do? Do you ignore it? So we wonder about that. Dinosaurs. That's definitely tied in with evolution. Certainly with our school systems. Can you imagine the school day starts in one of the public schools and the teacher says, hey, today we're going to talk about dinosaurs, so get your Bibles out, everyone. Not going to happen. And even the Christians sitting in those schools don't expect that. Well, if you want to learn about dinosaurs, you can't go to the Bible because the Bible doesn't talk about dinosaurs. You got to go to the secular scientists. That's the mindset, rather than like, well, wait a minute, what does the Bible say? I have a 3-part series just on dinosaurs in the Bible. That's another talk. I have to keep it super brief today, but we'll touch on dinosaurs. Natural selection, that's another one of those things where that's evolution. And then the last one is going to be mutations. We'll talk about that because we think of mutations and natural selection. That's kind of how evolution works. So those are all things that you think, what do you do with them as a Christian? Aren't those scientific things? And do you have to deny science to believe the Bible? It's not true. No, I always say bring it on. Whatever you want to bring on from science, bring it on, because the Bible is true cover to cover. And if you're understanding the science properly, it's going to confirm what Scripture has been telling us all along. So let's jump in. We're going to go through this whole list, spend a little more time on this Big Bang thing, and then some of the other ones will go a little bit quicker. So jumping in. Force of gravity, the capital G there is the gravitational constant. The number at the bottom is the value for the gravitational constant. The reason I have a picture of the sun up there reminds me to tell a story. You know, when I was back in college, I was calculating things all the time for physics. Graduated, didn't have to calculate nearly as many things anymore. I was on a plane one day, and I was just bored out of my skull. And I was looking for something to do to pass the time. And I remembered when I used to calculate things that would take a long time, maybe I could just calculate something, waste some time. So I looked out the window of the airplane and I saw the sun rising. And I wondered, could I calculate the mass of the sun just from what I remembered in my head from physics? Kind of bizarre, you might not want to make eye contact with me later. But I remembered that formula, force of gravity, and so I got out a piece of paper, I drew some diagrams of the earth and the sun, and the centrifugal force and all these things, and I calculated a number at the bottom. I had no idea if I was anywhere close to being right. I didn't care. I wasted time. That's all I wanted to do. I got home. I got out my physics book, which I still have. That's a picture of it. And Amy says, "Oh, there's a surprise that you still have that book." But I looked up the value, and I was just 0.1% off. It's like, that's pretty cool. I was flying on an airplane. I just calculated the mass of the sun. What's the point of that other than I'm weird? The stuff works. The science works. Christians aren't afraid of science. We love it. Again, it came out of the Christian community. So, but the bigger question is, why is that capital G, that gravitational constant, why is it that value and not something else? If there was a Big Bang, it could have been anywhere. In fact, secular scientists will even tell us, if you had a ruler that would stretch from one side of the universe, reach all the way to the other side, every inch on that ruler could represent a different possible value for the gravitational constant. If there was a Big Bang, it could have ended up anywhere. So let's say that this is where it is today, right at the 1 inch mark there. So that's where it is. What if it wasn't there? What if there was a Big Bang? We could take this and slide it halfway across the universe to see how that affects us. we're not gonna do that. We're gonna bump this 1 notch, 1 inch. What would happen? Animals anywhere near the size of people would be instantly crushed. Insects would have to have very thick legs to support themselves, and creatures much bigger than that, they couldn't even survive. That's from tweaking the gravitational constant 1 little notch out of a ruler that goes all the way across the universe. Did we get lucky and it landed right where it needs to be? Or might that be evidence of design? That's just one factor, gravitational constant. Next one, the cosmological constant. Get energy density of empty space, get those details. Just another constant in physics that's very, very finely tuned. It's got to be right where it is. What are the chances that would happen by accident? No designer, no creator. Secular scientists have calculated that. The chances are 1 chance in 100 million, billion. That is a massive, massive number. Here's what's more interesting. What are the chances both of these things turn out right by accident? Not just that cosmological constant, but that one and the first one, the gravitational constant. They've calculated that too. 1 chance in 100 million. Trillion. You haven't studied math or science much yet? That's a big number. That screams that ain't no accident. Owen Gingrich, a Harvard astronomer, said a common sense and satisfying interpretation of a world suggests the designing of a super intelligence. He's just saying there's no way this universe is an accident. And that's just 2 factors. We could look at so many more. We got to keep moving. I quoted this in the service this morning, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made, the starry host by the breath of his mouth. God created this universe. Fingerprints are all over it. Got to move on very quickly to ape men. These will go a little faster. This is biggie. Evolution. You cannot deny evolution. Go to a museum. They have real bones. Some are replicas, that's fine, but they actually have real bones from ape men. You cannot deny that. This book you're looking at, this is a real long time ago. Ignorant goat herders, they didn't know. They told stories because they didn't know the details, and there's missing parts and errors and contradictions, right? Science deals with ape men, right? Disproves the Bible. Well, let's look at some examples here. First one is Nebraska man. This is Hesperopithecus harold-cookii. They give them these big elaborate names to make them sound very impressive. Hesperopithecus just means ape of the Western world, and harold-cookii was discovered by a guy named Harold Cook. So that's where the name came up. The common name, they call it Nebraska man because they found the evidence in Wyoming. No, they found it in Nebraska. So this is Nebraska man. Everything you would want in an ape man. Very apish, brutish-like face, longer hair, standing upright like a human, but hunched over a little bit. He's got a club in his hand, so he knew about Stone Age tools. He's got apparently a wife. She's making a fire there, and then it's a little bit harder to see, but that's pointing to some horses, and then there's some camels up here, so they knew about domesticated animals. They discovered a lot of details about Nebraska man. Okay, what was the evidence? What did they dig up that allowed them to figure out all those details? One bone.
Yeah.
Just one bone, and that one bone was a tooth. How do you take one tooth and make a whole ape man out of it? How tall he was, stooped over, Stone Age tools, fire, domesticated animals. You wouldn't know any of that. One tooth. Later they found more of these teeth. It was from an extinct pig. So they took one pig's tooth and made a whole ape man out of it because they wanted it to be an ape man. A few years ago I was down in the greater area here, and there's another museum. You got ICR in Dallas, but you also have the Creation Evidences Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. I know the curator there. He and I did some missions work in Fiji. Amy was there too, Dr. Carl Baugh. So I called him up and I said, hey, I'm in the area. I've never seen your museum. I'd like to pop in. So I spent like half a day with him, and he showed me around. He goes, hey, you know that tooth from Nebraska man? I said, yeah, Hesperopithecus harold-cookii. I goes, oh, I guess you do know him. I said, yeah. He goes, you know they found more teeth. I said, yeah. He goes, would you like to hold one in your hand? I said, yeah. So here's me in his museum, and there is a tooth we'll zoom in on. That was really cool to be able to say I held one of the other teeth that they found to realize Nebraska man is not an ape man, it's a pig's tooth. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was a treat. So Nebraska man, they made a whole ape man out of one single pig's tooth. Then we have Piltdown man, Eanthropus dawsoni, another ape man. Everything you'd want in an ape man, very brutish. Like, what was the evidence for this? They found some bones from a human skull and bones from an ape jaw. The discoverer told everyone, he lied, he told everyone it was on the same skeleton. So this creature kind of looked human, kind of looked ape. And the world's leading experts couldn't tell this guy had filed the ape teeth down flat to make him look more human, and he'd discolored the bones to make him look older. And this was in the textbooks in our school systems for over 40 years. Think of all the youth going through there learning proof of evolution. The Bible's wrong, Piltdown man is proof, you cannot deny it, and the whole thing was a fraud. Experts studying it years and years, they didn't want us to see that it was a fraud. They wanted it to be evidence, and so that's what they saw, and they controlled the textbooks, so all the kids learned the Bible's wrong, evolution's a fact. You can't deny stuff like this. More current example, everyone's heard of Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, just means southern ape from the far region of Africa, and Lucy. Specifically, we're going to keep this short. Take a look at Lucy's eyes, the whites of her eyes. Chimps and apes don't have whites of their eyes. Why did they put whites of the eyes on Lucy? They certainly didn't find the eyes, those are long gone. They wanted her to look more human. They've even admitted they pose her in the museums as she's like deep into contemplation about the universe around her and all that. It's just, they wanted her to be an ape man. Here's a little Far Side humor break. I love Far Side. It said, rocking the anthropological world, a second Lucy is discovered in southern Uganda. So, he had my kind of humor. I thought it was funny. So, but back to Lucy. Again, it was discovered in 1974 by Donald Johanson. But what about this name Lucy? Where did they come out? Again, everyone's heard of Lucy. Where did they come up with that? Well, in the camp where they were digging, they were listening to music, the Beatles, and they were listening specifically to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So they just gave this one the name Lucy. Again, free trivia, won't charge you for that one either. Here's some more details about Lucy. You found only 20% of the skeleton, claimed it was 3.5 million years old, and that it walked upright like a human. Take a look at Lucy. This is how they have her depicted in museums today. Looks very, very much like a chimp, except standing more upright like a human. And we'll look at something else in a second. Again, I always have to shorten up my talks. There's so much that I leave out. I have a video of, I don't know if it was Newsweek or Time or what, 60 Minutes. It was 60 Minutes. They were talking about the discovery of Lucy and all that, and how, here's this, our ancestor, because it was kind of chimp-like, but standing more upright like a human, very different from a chimp. There's a guy in the background at a table with a grinder, and they're saying, we had to grind Lucy's hips down to make them fit the way we knew they fit, because the way they were fitting was more like a chimp. But we knew they fit more like a human standing upright, but we had to grind them to make them fit that way. It's like, do you hear yourself? It's like totally cheating. Like, no, it can't fit naturally. We're going to make it the way we want to. So now Lucy's standing upright. But take a look at Lucy's feet. They look a lot more like human feet than they do like chimp feet. Why did they put human feet on Lucy? They didn't find the foot bones when they found Lucy, the first skeleton here. Why did they put human feet on her? Because over 1,000 miles away in rock layers that's lower, that they say is older, they found human footprints. Well, if people are already around leaving those footprints, Lucy's not on her way to evolving to a human, they already exist. That would ruin their story. So they said, oh, Lucy must have had human-like feet. She was walking around leaving these footprints. Well, later they found more of these skeletons, more Australopithecines, and they found the foot bones and the hand bones, and they're long and curved, just like a chimpanzee. But you don't change the museums because that costs money, and it would ruin their story. So if you ever go to a museum and you see Lucy, take a look at her feet. They look very human when they know they weren't. And there are many, 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 many more examples. I'm going to summarize the whole thing this way. Every ape man you have ever seen in the past or ever will see in the future falls into one of three categories. It was either truly just an extinct like chimp that they tried to make look more human. That would be Lucy, extinct chimpanzee that they tried to look more human. Or it was really fully human that they tried to look more ape-like. That would be Neanderthal man. Europeans and Asians today have 1 to 3% Neanderthal DNA in them, meaning they were intermarrying in the past and having offspring. You can only do that with humans. Neanderthals were perfectly human. They had some differences, and they can be explained easily with Tower of Babel and Ice Age and things like that. Perfectly human, but in the museums, they make them look a lot more brutish and ape-like. So give you the impression we've evolved from Neanderthal man. No, we didn't evolve from them. They're perfectly human. There was evidence of them burying their dead and musical instruments and all these things. So that's an example of perfectly human that they want to make look more ape-like. Or the middle category is a mix of bones. Sometimes by accident. Sometimes they'll dig something up and they think it was on the same skeleton and it was an innocent mistake. Other times they're just lying. They're telling you this is on the same skeleton. No, there's a chimp and a human in the same area. So everyone you've ever seen falls in one of those categories, and if they come up with a new one tomorrow, it'll fall into one of those categories. When you look at the fossil record, there are two major features you notice. This is from an evolutionist. Sudden appearance and stasis. What does that mean? Sudden appearance means when they see a fossil, it comes out of nowhere suddenly, fully formed, ready to go. It's not like here, example, the trilobite down in the Cambrian layer, one of the lowest layers in the earth. The trilobite fossil has the most complex eye known to man. And when they first see it, it's fully formed, ready to go. It's not like they look lower, like, oh yep, here's half a trilobite with that simpler eye, getting more and more complex. No, boom, fully formed out of nowhere. It's actually called the Cambrian explosion. Again, I can't go into all those details. All these life forms just explode onto the scene, fully formed, ready to go. That's sudden appearance. The other thing he talked about was stasis, staying the same. So when they do see something, it's coming out of nowhere, fully formed, and then when they see it again higher up, it's staying the same. It's not changing into something different. That's not evolution, fully formed from beginning and not changing. Evolution would be the simplest thing you can imagine, but just a little bit more complex and a little bit more gradual. You could just trace it all the way up, slow change over millions of years. That's not what they see. They see sudden complex leg right from the beginning, and it's not changing. The order that we actually see matches a biblical flood. And again, I've got a 4-part series on the Genesis flood, and that again, it's free streaming video. I skipped there's a slide I hid here to shorten this up. But I show that these layers, they were not laid down slowly over hundreds of millions of years, tracking life as it changed. Those layers were laid down catastrophically in the year of the flood, from bottom to top. Each layer was laid down catastrophically quickly, and then the next layer was laid down very shortly after that. Could have been minutes later, could have been days or weeks later, but you don't have millions of years in between. That is a catastrophic flood, and what you see, fossils in it represent where creatures were living when the flood came. 95% of the sea creature, or 95% of creatures in the fossil record are sea creatures. 95%. Because the ocean waters are coming onto the continent, bringing the sea creatures. Where are they going? They're not running away. So they get buried, and then later, higher up, you have animals that are more mobile, trying to get away from the flood waters. Some of them eventually get buried. Anyway, a lot more detail about our 4-part series. We'll get you up to speed on that. Again, that's free. Carbon-14 is what we're going to cover a lot. And I really have to perform a miracle here and keep this one short, but this one is challenging for people. And I call this the Carbon-14 Trump card. Not President Trump, but the Trump card. If you're playing cards, the one card that beats everything else. This is what happens. You have a skeptic and a Christian in a conversation. The skeptic says to the Christian, do you really believe that creation account stuff in the Bible? The Christian might say, well, yeah, I guess so. And the skeptic says, what about carbon-14 dating? And the Christian might say, well, I don't know much about it. What about it? Well, carbon-14 dating proves the Earth is billions of years old and the Bible's wrong. And then the Christian says, well, I don't know much about carbon-14 dating. I just believe the Bible. The skeptic says, yeah, you have your little mythology there, but I live in the real world. We deal with science. We prove things. And he walks off. And then you're completely humiliated. You're embarrassed. You're thinking, I don't know that I want to share my faith anymore. And you might even start doubting your faith. And many youth walk away because they just think, I can't keep rejecting science and claiming I believe in some ancient book. So they walk away. So I have to keep this brief, but I'm going to share a few very, very important things with you that aren't overly technical. They should be very, very helpful and practical. 2 major points about carbon-14 dating. Actually, back up a second. If you ever have someone make that claim to you about carbon-14, it proves the Earth is billions of years old and the Bible is wrong. It actually proves one thing. The person who just told you that knows nothing, seriously nothing about carbon-14 dating. They are repeating something somebody else told them. And whoever told them that person doesn't know anything because they would have never said that. They are repeating something else Someone told them, and on down the line, and every one of them wanted to believe that. They want the Bible to be wrong so they can do whatever they want with their lives. It's a heart issue, not an academic issue. So here are the two major things I'm going to share that are going to help clear up the whole carbon-14 dating thing and make you not so intimidated by it. Point number one, carbon-14 dating can only be used to date things that were once living. You can't date rocks with carbon-14. You can date fossils, skin, and things like that, but not rocks. It doesn't give you the ages of rocks. And number two, no scientist on the planet would ever use carbon-14 to date something that they think is probably pretty old, 200,000 years old, 1 million, 2 billion, whatever. They would never use carbon-14 because it decays away too quickly. Carbon-14 will only last a number of thousands of years, and then it's gone. So if something is 100,000 years old or 1 million years old or whatever, there won't be any carbon-14 left. It would have decayed away. It'd be like if there was an ice cube up here right now in this pulpit, and I told you this ice cube has been here for 500 years. And you'd think, it's cold out today, but it's been warmer here in Dallas. That thing would have melted after a few minutes. There's no way it's been here 500 years. It melts away. Same thing with carbon-14. It'll last a few tens of thousands of years, and that's it. So if something is 1 million years old, you can't have carbon-14 in that. So no scientist would ever use it. So when the skeptic says it proves the Earth is billions of years old, no, it doesn't give you old ages, and you can't date rocks anyway. And it doesn't disprove the Bible when you use it properly. It actually lines up with the biblical narrative. We find carbon-14 where it ain't supposed to be, like coal. Coal, they say, is a couple of 100 million years old, okay? You can't have carbon-14 in it, that would be long gone. We have yet to find a single piece of coal on the planet that doesn't still have carbon-14 in it. Well, it takes millions of years to form coal, right? And oil, millions of years, dinosaurs and all that. It's like, you can make it in a number of hours in a laboratory. Oil and coal in a few hours, actually minutes for some of these things. It doesn't take time. It takes processes. It takes the right conditions. It takes organic material, heat, pressure, and water. Guess what the flood would have done? The flood would have buried all that organic material under all those layers, causing a lot of pressure and heat, and you get the water from the flood. Those organic seams would turn into coal seams in a short period of time. It doesn't take time at all. And then diamonds. They tell us diamonds are at least 1 to 3 billion with a B, 1 to 3 billion years old. Can't have carbon-14 in there. Guess what? We have carbon-14 inside a diamond. So whenever the carbon was compressed and formed this diamond, some of that was carbon-14, which is radioactive, and it was trapped in there. Well, if it's 1 billion years old, it would have been long gone. Well, okay, it got contaminated. Some carbon-14 from something else got into that diamond. Impossible. Diamonds are the hardest substance known to man. You can't contaminate them. So if it's in there, it was in there when it formed, and it had to have formed thousands of years ago, not billions of years ago. So, and it goes on and on. There's so many other things that are cool, but I gotta keep moving with these topics. Dinosaurs. Actually, you don't even know that. You've just been taught that so much, it's gotta be true. From kindergarten on up. In fact, I don't have time for the full story, but actually Amy and I were at a Goodwill store, and 2 quick stories. I don't usually like going in shopping. She loves going in there, and she finds great deals. One day I was in with her, and I was bored out of my skull, and I had already calculated the mass of the sun, so I couldn't do that. But I was just looking through the men's t-shirts. I pulled one out and I said, "Hey, Amy, look at this one. This looks just like my t-shirt." She goes, "No, it is your t-shirt. You're not buying it back." It really was.
It's your t-shirt.
But another time, I was wasting time while I was in there, and I thought, I know, I'm going to go over to the children's section. And I'm going to find the first book I see on the shelf, in the children's section, anything about dinosaurs. I'm going to pull it off the shelf. And I bet myself, the first page of that book that I've never seen before will talk about millions of years. The first page. And if I'm right, I owe me a hot foot sundae. And if I'm wrong, I owe me a hot foot sundae. So either way, it's going to work. So I found a random book, I pulled it out. I actually ended up buying it so I could put it in my video presentation. I bought it, I pulled it out, I opened up to page 1. Millions of years ago, dinosaurs roamed the earth, so I got the hot foot sundae. But, so we learned, dinosaurs lived millions of years ago, and then kids go to church. and they don't really hear about dinosaurs. They go back to school, they hear about dinosaurs and millions of years and evolution, they go back to church and they hear about Jesus, and they go back to school, learn about astronomy, biology, and they go back to church and hear about Jesus. So they assume, I guess dinosaurs lived millions of years ago because my church's not telling me it didn't, and they're giving me the impression you can't learn about dinosaurs in church, that's what school's for. So you just accept it as true. But we don't know they're millions of years old, and all I have time to share with you is 4 scientific reasons why there's absolutely no possible way these bones are millions of years old. Number 1, most dinosaur bones we discover are still fresh, like a deer bone out in the field. If they were 65 or 100 million years old, they would have either disintegrated or they would have fossilized a long time ago. They're still fresh. Secondly, we have carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. Carbon-14 should have decayed after a few tens of thousands of years. It should be gone. If they were 65 million years old, carbon-14 would have melted away. It's still there, indicating thousands of years. More exciting than that, we now have soft tissue and red blood cells in dinosaur bones. I always say you're probably sick and tired of hearing about soft tissue and dinosaur bones, right? No? Maybe they just discovered this 2 days ago and you haven't caught it in the news cycle yet, right? But prior to 1995, they've known about this for a long time. Why aren't you hearing about it? Because they can't answer how it's possible you could have soft tissue or red blood cells in dinosaur bones if they're 65 or 100 million years old. I don't have time for the story of Dr. Mary Schweitzer, who initially discovered some of this, and she thought it can't be soft tissue because we know they're 65 million years old. So she did her test again. Looked like soft tissue, but it can't be because they're 65 million years old. She did her test again and again, 17 times. She did not like those results, and eventually she's like, this is soft tissue. So very exciting. I'm going to show you a super short video. You're going to see something very few people on the planet have ever seen. You're going to see actual dinosaur soft tissue in a laboratory being stretched and snapping back. So here, let's see, I'll back up a second. And get this set up. So here we go. Uh-oh. Back up again. I hope I can do this. If not, I can step over and all I have to do is touch the graphic. So I'll do this and that. And that. Here we go. Does that look 65 million years old? Elastic, snapping back, looks fresh. That's dinosaur soft tissue. And we are finding it all over the place. They were never looking for it before because they thought it couldn't be there. When they found it by accident, they were shocked. They don't know what to do with it. Creationists, we're jumping all over it, but they don't play well with us. As secular scientists, so we have to get our own data. I did a dinosaur excavation a few summers ago in western Colorado, digging up a femur from a Camarasaurus, sent it over to London, or University of Liverpool in the United Kingdom to be tested. Actually sent it through Institute for Creation Research here in Dallas, and they took it over. We're finding hundreds of examples of soft tissue and red blood cells and collagen and many other biological materials that cannot be there if they're millions of years old. If they were buried 4,500 years ago, they could be there. And now we actually have DNA in dinosaur bones. DNA is more fragile than soft tissue. It cannot be there unless the Bible's true. Then we would be so surprised. So these are 4 scientific reasons. There's absolutely no possible way those bones are millions of years old. And if you want more information, I have a 3-part video series on dinosaurs in the Bible where I go through a lot more detail on that. Were starting out with the Aryan race, and then the Germans, and all the way on down to the blacks, Polish, and the Jews. The Jews, they said, had a fiendish skull. They're only maybe half human, but you get rid of them. You don't want them reproducing because they're not the fittest. So he was trying to proactively enact survival of the fittest on the human race and only save the best of the best, all based on the idea of evolution. So I think it's really sad when Christians say, sure, I believe in evolution. God used evolution. He could evolve Adam from some ape-like creature. He can do anything he wants. Yeah, God's all powerful and he can do anything he wants. It's not about what he could do. It's what he said he did. And when you look at scripture, it is not compatible with Darwinian evolution. Yeah, variety, we have variations. All 350 breeds of dogs today came from some wolves. That's not evolution because it's going downhill. It's a whole nother lecture. Yeah, variety, but not Darwinian evolution. So when people try to put God's stamp of approval on evolution, I think it's horrendous and it does damage to the authority of God's word. But anyway, that's where it came from, natural selection. We do call it survival of the fittest. Here's an example. 2 dogs living in an area, greyhound and a husky. Let's say over time, global warming kicks in and it gets really cold out. Don't get me started on that. But which of these 2 dogs would survive best in a cold environment?
Husky.
Obviously the husky. Thicker fur and all that, it would do really well. The greyhounds might die out. The huskies survive. They have husky puppies, and pretty soon you got tons of huskies around, but maybe very few, if any, greyhounds. That's survival of the fittest. The huskies were the fittest. They survived. No problem with that. I might fast forward here. It's also maybe the survival of the luckiest, because let's say a volcano goes off and wipes out the huskies. Did they die because they weren't fit? No, they got knocked out from a volcano. You know, if the greyhounds had just moved out somewhere else, they didn't get hit by the volcano. They weren't better fit. They just got lucky that they weren't in that area. So you could also call it survival of the luckiest, but keep moving here. Natural selection, we could call it survival of the fittest. No problem. But it doesn't explain the arrival of the fittest. How did you get dogs to begin with? Natural selection doesn't create anything. And many people think Darwin is the one who really came up with this and it's proof of evolution. Not at all. It was Edward Blythe who was talking about this concept about 23 years before Darwin even thought about it. And it fits in with scripture that God created everything perfect. Adam and Eve sinned, which brought death and a curse into God's perfect creation. Things have been going downhill, and some things die out along the way because they can't handle the changes or mutations and all that. So yeah, things are dying out and going downhill, perfectly consistent with scripture. But having things die out over time does not give you Darwinian evolution. It won't change a single cell into a human being when you're killing things off. You got to create new stuff. Here's a quote from an evolutionist. He said, natural selection must not be equated with evolution. Natural selection does not explain the origin of new variants. It doesn't give you new stuff, it just explains why something died out. That's all it does. And it's not nature, and it's not selecting. You don't have nature. What's nature? Like Mother Nature, she's looking around, oh, I like this, let's keep that, oh, let's get rid of this. No, it's not nature proactively selecting anything at all. And here's an analogy that I came up with, which Randy Galuza, the president of ICR, really liked. Let's say the temperature drops, and it gets colder. I know it doesn't happen here in Dallas, but when the temperature drops outside, does the change in temperature create a thermostat and a furnace in your house? No. You have a thermostat and a furnace in your house. The thermostat is designed to monitor the environment. If the temperature drops, it knows to send a signal to the furnace to kick it on to heat the house up. It's a designed feature to monitor the environment and make appropriate changes. That's what God did. God designed his creatures to be able to detect certain changes in their environment and then turn switches on and off in their DNA to enable them to adapt to certain environments. If the switches get broken, they go extinct through mutations or whatever. And it's limited, they can't adjust to any environment at all, but God designed them to be able to fill the earth. He commanded them to fill the earth and he gave them the ability to make these adjustments. It's a design feature. This is not something that, it got cold out and the cold temperature created these cool features of a thermostat and a furnace. That's crazy. It's the same thing with nature. So the last section here, mutations. This is definitely connected with evolution. And so we got the rungs on the ladder here. Those are called nucleotides. That's where most of the information is in your cells. It's on the rungs of the ladder. And mutations are accidental copying errors. So when you have an animal or humans reproduce, they're taking their DNA that they already have to make it a copy, passing it on to the offspring. And there's so much information, like the human DNA has about 3 billion letters, 3 billion rungs on the ladder. There's so much information there that when it gets copied, mistakes can happen. There's a very complex error correction system that's like 3-tiered, very complex, I have to skip that. But sometimes a mistake gets all the way through and gets passed on to the offspring. So the accidental copying error, that's a mutation. That's what evolutionists say make things better and better and better when you mess up information. there's a lot more to it. I talked about that yesterday. I'm going to hit it from a different angle today. This is from UC Berkeley, California. It's a very liberal institution. They said mutations are essential to evolution. They are the raw material of genetic variation. Without mutations, evolution cannot occur. Mutations are the only game in town. You want Darwinian evolution? It's only mutations. Mutations are the only thing that are going to explain how you have a single-celled organism and can make it into every other life form on this planet. That's what they admit. The only thing I'm going to focus on, we could go for months on many details, the only thing I'm going to focus on as the last thing I share here, something called the waiting time problem. How long do you need to wait for copying errors to produce evolution? It's a straightforward question. So, how long do you have to wait? We're not going to cover all of evolution from that single-celled organism to every other life form on this planet. To keep it simpler, just one of the tips of the branches here, human evolution, which would take us from an ape-like creature into chimpanzees and another branch into humans. They don't believe we've evolved from a chimpanzee. We got chimps today, we got humans today. Maybe both of us came from a common ancestor 6 million years ago. So human evolution, they say, took 6 million years. So that's the time frame we have to work with. Something existed. They can't really tell you what it was other than it was like ape-like. And then it branched off into chimps and humans, and it took 6 million years. There are conservatively 300 million differences between chimps today and humans. 300 million rungs of the ladder are different. So if you're going to mutate this thing, you have to make 300 million changes over time to eventually one of the routes produces chimps, the other route produces humans. That's what's going on here. All these mistakes, 300 million of them. But it's not just any kind of mistake. That's going to destroy things. You need to make random changes that are positive, that are beneficial, that are related to each other so the changes could build into something bigger. And they have to happen at the same point in time, in the same area, with two creatures that kind of like each other and stuff like that. So not just 300 million random changes, anyone can make those changes. These are all really good changes. So how long would it take while you're making random changes to come up with 300 million really good ones that are coordinated, related, all in the same area, same time? How long would it take? Well, that's our target. I mentioned Logos Research Associates, the group that I'm president of, and Dr. John Sanford from Cornell was the one who started the group. He and Dr. Baumgartner, the PhD geophysicist, and two other scientists built a software system called Mendel's Accountant. Mendel, Gregor Mendel, father of modern genetics, and then accounting. This is doing genetic accounting. What does that mean? They're studying the real world around us, animals. They're seeing reproduction. They're seeing the mistakes that are happening in their DNA. Real data. What do mutations actually do? They're studying all that, and they put the details in their software so they could then figure out, what might happen 2 years from now if these rates keep up? How about 10 years? How about 1,000 years? How about 1,000,000 years? They can ask it questions. Well, one question they asked it was, these mutations that we can see today, real science that we're observing, how long would it take for that stuff to produce human evolution? We need 300 million good changes. So that's what they asked the software system. But they started out simple. Let's not jump right into the 300 million we need. How about just 2? Making 2 rung changes doesn't do anything, but it's a start. How long would it take to get 2 of these good changes fixed into the population in the genetics? 84 million years. Again, I'm skipping some details, but to get 2 of these, and I say locked into the species where all species have this thing now, where it's not going away, they all have it. It would take 84 million years to get 2 of these good ones to actually stick around and now be out there. Then they asked, okay, how long would it take for 8? 8 nucleotide changes, 8 rungs on that ladder is equivalent to like making the word yes. Yesterday I used the example, if you saw a piece of paper with the word yes on it, would you think that I almost have all the information necessary to make a nuclear reactor? No, you get the English word yes. That's what 8 rungs of the ladder would be in our DNA, just like a simple word. So how long would it take to get this simple word through mutations? 18.5 billion years. They tell us the universe is 13.8 billion years old. I don't buy into that, but this is older than the universe itself just to get 8 changes. And we need 300 million. So summarizing this whole thing, a lot of numbers, we could give them more than 3,000 times the amount of time they want. They want 6 million years for human evolution. We'll give them 18.5 billion years. and they can still only come up with 0.0000027% of what they need. Not going to happen. This is called the waiting time problem. Creationists have a challenge getting their research published. Why? Because the secular journals say, we won't publish your stuff because you're not real scientists. Why are we not real scientists? Because you don't publish in our journals. Why can't we publish in your journals? Because you're not real scientists. Why are we not real scientists? Because you don't publish in our journals. Round and round. They control it. They won't publish the stuff. This article called The Waiting Time Problem, this research paper actually got published in a highly technical journal that most people never even heard of. And so they'll publish it on page 47 in the corner or whatever. And so later I asked Dr. Sanford, I said, hey John, I said, whatever happened to that article? They actually published your article. What was the response? He said, silence. Because that's what they do. Once in a great while, they'll publish something and then no one responds to it. They act like it's not even there and then move on. So that's what happened. This article is available online. A number of years ago, I checked, it had over 10,000 downloads and reviews. How many scientists tried to refute it? 0. None even tried. It is so solid. So why don't all scientists believe in creation? Because it's not an academic debate, it's a heart issue.
Right.
So we're winding down. I'll share a real quick story in a second. Every time we reproduce, we add at least 100 mistakes to our DNA as human beings. So one Russian scientist said this, why have we not died 100 times over? If we've been evolving for 6 million years and we keep adding 100 mistakes, we shouldn't function anymore. It's like going into a software program, making random changes to it. How many random changes can you make and then the software doesn't even boot up anymore? Our software shouldn't boot up anymore if we've been making 100 mistakes every time we reproduce for 6 million years. If we've only been around for 6,000 years and started over about 4,000 years, 4,500 years ago, which actually genetics backs that up too, and we could handle the changes. So it's fascinating. So mutations, they don't cut it. They don't support evolution. They support a fallen world more recently. Every one of these things does not support evolution. It supports the biblical creation account.